What happens when entire nations start crumbling under the weight of debt, disasters, and broken governments, and only one tiny island knows the way out? Right now, across Asia, 7 countries are experiencing economic collapse, political chaos, and social breakdown on a scale the world has not seen in decades. Millions of people are losing jobs, going hungry, and watching their governments fail them in real time. Currencies are crashing, power grids are shutting down, leaders are fleeing, and yet sitting right in the middle of all this chaos is Singapore, a small city-state that not only survived every crisis, but came out stronger every single time. How did Singapore do it? And why are so many of its neighbours falling apart while it thrives? In this video, we are going to go country by country, look at exactly what is going wrong, and then reveal the system Singapore built that the rest of Asia desperately needs to copy. Stay with us. This is one of the most important stories happening in the world right now. Number 1. Sri Lanka. Let us start with Sri Lanka. Just a few years ago, this beautiful island nation in the Indian Ocean was seen as a rising tourist destination with real economic promise. Then, everything collapsed. The government ran out of foreign currency almost completely. Sri Lanka could not pay for fuel imports, so petrol stations ran dry. It could not pay for medicine, so hospitals ran out of basic supplies. Rolling power cuts lasted up to 13 hours a day. The inflation rate hit over 50%. Citizens stood in lines for days just to fill a gas cylinder. The president at the time literally fled the country after thousands of protesters stormed his official residence. The root cause was a combination of reckless government borrowing, a disastrous overnight switch to organic farming that destroyed harvests, and the collapse of tourism during the pandemic. Sri Lanka borrowed billions it could not repay, then ran out of time. The IMF stepped in with a bailout, but the suffering of ordinary Sri Lankans was already devastating. This is what happens when governments spend beyond their means with no plan.
Number 2. Pakistan. Pakistan is a country of over 220 million people, and it is drowning. The economy has been on life support for years, kept alive only by emergency loans from the International Monetary Fund and financial aid from friendly nations like China and Saudi Arabia. Inflation, at its worst point, crossed 38%, meaning the price of basic food items like flour, cooking oil and vegetables became unaffordable for tens of millions of families. The Pakistani rupee lost more than half its value against the US dollar in just a couple of years. Unemployment is rampant. Political instability has made things worse, with the country cycling through governments and military interventions at alarming speed. In 2022, catastrophic flooding submerged 1/3 of the entire country, destroying crops, homes and infrastructure worth over $30 billion. Climate change, political dysfunction, a bloated military budget eating up resources meant for education and health, and a tax base that almost no one actually pays into. These are the pillars of Pakistan's ongoing crisis. The country is surviving, but barely, and millions are living in poverty.
Number 3. Myanmar. Myanmar is not just falling apart economically, it is in the middle of a full-scale civil war. In February 2021, the military staged a coup and overthrew the democratically elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. What followed was a brutal crackdown on protesters, journalists and civilians. Thousands of people have been killed. Hundreds of thousands have been displaced from their homes. Entire villages have been burned. The economy, which was actually growing before the coup, immediately went into freefall. Foreign investment evaporated overnight. The banking system nearly collapsed as citizens rushed to withdraw their savings. The currency, the kyat, lost enormous value. Businesses shut down. The United Nations estimates that nearly half the population of Myanmar is now living in poverty. Ethnic armed groups control large parts of the country, fighting the military junta in a conflict with no clear end in sight. Myanmar had a brief window where it looked like democracy and economic growth might take hold. The coup slammed that window shut. Today, it is one of the most dangerous and economically devastated countries in all of Asia, and the international community has largely failed to stop it.
Number 4. Bangladesh. Bangladesh had a remarkable story for a long time. It lifted millions out of extreme poverty through its garment manufacturing industry and was seen as one of the development success stories of the 21st century. But in recent years, cracks have become craters. In 2024, a massive student-led uprising toppled the government of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who had ruled for 15 consecutive years. She fled the country as protests turned violent and dozens were killed. The uprising exposed deep public anger over corruption, unemployment among educated youth, and the concentration of power in one political dynasty. Bangladesh's economy is heavily dependent on garment exports, which makes it extremely vulnerable to global demand shifts and trade disruptions. The country also faces existential threats from climate change, as rising sea levels and increasingly severe cyclones threaten to flood vast low-lying areas where tens of millions of people live. Bangladesh is also home to over 1 million Rohingya refugees from Myanmar, adding enormous pressure to its resources. The new government faces a mountain of challenges with limited tools to solve them. The optimism of a decade ago has given way to uncertainty and unrest. Number 5. Laos. Laos is one of the lesser discussed crises in Asia, but it is arguably one of the most severe. This small, landlocked nation in Southeast Asia is in the grip of a debt trap that many experts believe it cannot escape from on its own. Laos borrowed enormous sums of money from China to build infrastructure, most notably a high-speed railway connecting it to China's border. The railway was meant to transform Laos into a transit hub and generate revenue. Instead, it has generated far less money than projected, while the debt repayments continue to pile up. Laos now owes China a staggering proportion of its total external debt. The Laotian kip currency has collapsed dramatically, losing more than half its value and causing food and fuel prices to skyrocket. Inflation at one point exceeded 40%. Electricity, which Laos actually exports to neighbouring countries, became unreliable for its own citizens because selling power abroad is more profitable than supplying it domestically. Young, educated Laos citizens are leaving the country in significant numbers, seeking better opportunities in Thailand, South Korea, and beyond. The brain drain is robbing Laos of the very people it needs to build a better future. This is a slow-motion disaster unfolding quietly, with very little international attention.
Number 6. Cambodia. Cambodia presents a different kind of crisis, one rooted in political capture and the hollowing out of institutions. Prime Minister Hun Sen ruled the country for nearly 4 decades, making him one of the longest-serving leaders in the world. In 2023, he transferred power to his son, Hun Manet, in what critics called a dynastic handover, dressed up as a democratic election. The main opposition party had already been dissolved years earlier. Free press is virtually non-existent. Civil society organizations operate under constant threat. What this means for the economy is that investment decisions, land rights, and business permits are often tied to political connections rather than merit or rule of law. Corruption is entrenched at every level. Cambodia is also deeply reliant on garment exports and tourism, both of which are vulnerable industries. Millions of Cambodians live on just a few dollars a day. The country's proximity to the South China Sea and its strategic position has brought in Chinese investment, but much of that investment has raised serious concerns about sovereignty and economic dependency. Cambodia has the appearance of stability on the surface,
But beneath it, the combination of authoritarian rule and institutional decay is setting the stage for a deeper crisis in the years ahead.
Number 7. North Korea. North Korea is in a category of its own. Under Kim Jong-un, the country has become the most isolated and secretive nation on Earth. Decades of international sanctions over its nuclear weapons program have cut it off from global trade and financial systems. The economy is entirely state-controlled, meaning there is no room for the kind of private enterprise and innovation that lifts living standards elsewhere. Famine has been a recurring reality. Defectors who have escaped to South Korea and other countries describe a life of extreme surveillance, food shortages, forced labour camps, and total control over every aspect of daily existence. Estimates of how many people have died in famines over the decades range into the hundreds of thousands. North Korea continues to pour resources into weapons development, including nuclear warheads and ballistic missiles, while its citizens go hungry. In recent years, North Korea reportedly sent troops to support Russia in its war against Ukraine, an extraordinary and alarming development that signals growing ties between isolated authoritarian regimes. North Korea is not simply falling apart, it has been in a permanent state of controlled collapse for decades, held together entirely by fear and the iron grip of one family's rule. Its people deserve a better future. They remain trapped.
So what does Singapore have that all these countries are missing? The answer is not natural resources. Singapore has almost none. It is not a large population or a giant domestic market. What Singapore built, starting from independence in 1965, was a system based on 3 unshakable principles. First, radical anti-corruption. Singapore's leaders accepted that without trust in government, nothing else works. Penalties for corruption are severe, and they apply equally to the powerful and the powerless. Second, long-term planning over short-term politics. Singapore made decisions that were painful in the short term, but built strength over decades, in housing, education, healthcare, and reserves. Third, meritocracy and rule of law. Businesses and citizens know that the rules apply to everyone, that contracts will be honoured, and that talent is rewarded regardless of who you know. None of this is magic. None of it is unique to Singapore's culture or geography. Every country we discuss today could choose to build these systems. The tragedy is that most have not. The question we should all be asking is not why Singapore succeeded. It is why so many of its neighbours are still choosing the path that leads to collapse. Think about that, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it.